This segment completes our look at CSS layout with a series of in-lecture exercises on Flexbox, preparatory to our layout lab. Now, below, upcoming here, are 3 Flexbox exercises building off of the CSS for the FB Grail, which you can still see here in the notes. And be sure to finish each of these without looking at the answer first, if at all possible. If you run into bugs, bring up your browser's inspection tool. Trace out the computed styles, look at the sizes of each element, and so forth. You'll need these skills in practical applications of layouts and styles, and practicing them is a major point of this segment. I actually hope you get a few bugs so you can trace them. Now, a few reminders of principles that I found helpful when doing these exercises myself. First, parent divs don't generally enclose their children graphically unless you make this happen via overflow or other style settings. But Flexbox containers do automatically. 2. Children don't necessarily take on the height and width of their parents either. Sometimes you must set their height and width to do so via settings like width: 100%. 3. When an element is too large for its content, the overflow property determines whether content is truncated or scrolled. And some of these exercises will require setting that. 4. A setting of height and width just under 100% is often needed to avoid scrolling because height and width don't cover the entire CSS box, including borders and margins. So a height of 100%, for instance, sets the non-border margin content's height to 100% of the parents, leaving the slight excess content of the border and the margin to be scrolled. So with that, on to our 3 questions. For each, I've supplied answer HTML and CSS files with names FBGrail1, FBGrail2, and FBGrail3. I'll demo each of these files for you as part of the question, but of course you shouldn't look at their source till you have solutions of your own. Also, I'll demo under IE, Chrome, and Firefox, and you should test your answers the same way. If you don't yet have Chrome, Firefox, and IE on your machine, now's the time to do so, with an obvious exception for IE if you're a Mac user. Get it running on Safari instead. A lot of work from here on will be expected to run on all 3, and to that end, by the way, here is FB Grail, our initial version, running on Firefox, running on Chrome, right there, and last and least, running on IE, thus. And so we come to in-lecture question 1. Adjust the fbgrail.css and fbgrail.html files as may be needed. You may leave either of them the same too, it depends, to have 2 center columns, as in an earlier in-lecture question, with each center column sharing the extra space equally. Here's a demo of what I mean using grail1.css and grail1.html. On Firefox, for instance, it looks like this. Those 2 columns sharing space equally. And I won't bang through all 3 of these, but let's at least make it work on Chrome to show that it does the same thing there. And I'll let you run yours on IE or on Safari as you choose. So that's what I'm looking for. Take the time to go and do that, and then come back to look at the answer I came up with. Coming back from a pause. My solution was simply to create a second center div, so I duplicated this one and called them center 1 and center 2. Thus, and then of course I had to change the style correspondingly to have a #center1, comma, right? #center2 with identical style to them. And that took care of it. No other changes were necessary. Okay, so then returning back to our original document here. Starting again from fbgrail.css and modifying only that file. In this case, you don't need to modify the HTML file. Rearrange the 3 columns so that left and right appear together at the left, and the center column, still the only one expanding or contracting, is to the right. And again, a quick demo of that. Here I have it on Chrome. center column now over here. And again, remember, don't modify the HTML for this. Just the CSS. And let's see, giving IE a fair chance here. We'll show what I mean there too. Grail 2. And once again, that center column is now over to the right. You may find, by the way, that the MS style for this is slightly differently named. So be careful about that. The references, or Google, will give you the right style name. And ideally, you should do this by adding just 3 lines to the CSS file. Think in terms of default values. So, pausing for you to sort that out. Change only the CSS. Try to add just 3 lines to it, making use of defaults. And do some lookup on the MS style that's needed. It's not entirely obvious. And coming back from a pause, this involves use of order, or WebKit order, or MS Flex order. Setting it to 1 for the center column is all you need to do. This takes into account the default values of 0 for the left and right columns, of course. So the 3 lines specifically that I added right here, thus. And so we come to question 3 now. This one's a bit more challenging. If you can do it in under 30 minutes, you did better than me. Starting a 3rd time from the original FB Grail code, now restored in our diagram, add vertical expand contract behavior as shown here in Chrome. FB Grail 3. Whereas you can see the header and the footer remain the same height, fixed height, and the 3 columns expand or contract vertically to absorb any other room on the page. And if they're shrunk to the point where not all text can be seen, a vertical scroll bar appears, as you can see right there, showing all 3 of them scrolling together. So modify fbgrail.html only to add 1 more div, enclosing a number of other divs. That's a big hint. 1 more div in the HTML, enclosing other divs. All other mods are to fbgrail.css only. And a few points to test, by the way, on all browsers. Here it is working on Firefox, for instance. First, the footer should be at the bottom of the browser window, no matter how long the page stretches, as you see here in Firefox. Consider height properties for that. 2, no scroll bar at all should appear for the entire page, only for the 3 columns if they're too small. And review the discussion above on height not accommodating borders for that one. 3rd, the 3-column scroll bar must appear only when absolutely needed, not sooner. Notice that it appears just as I have to scroll the text. 4, the 3 columns should still perform horizontally as they did previously. And then 5, the footer must show fully, not be shaved off at the bottom. As you can see here, and going back to Chrome here as well, it shows fully with nothing lost on its bottom edge. So, implement this then with the requirement that you change by adding only 1 div to the HTML and then modify CSS, and that all 5 of these points are satisfied on 3 different browsers. Coming back from a pause, probably a long one, the core idea is to add a new div. I called mine stack around the entire existing body from header to footer. And then to make that stack div a flex container with vertical orientation. Now, if you were stumped to the point of not being able to do it and this hint helps you, stop now and go back and try it with that idea in mind. If you did this, you were on the right track. So here is what my FBGrail 3.html looks like with the stack div, as you can see, enclosing everything from header to footer. And here's my FBGrail 3.css without line numbers, just to save room in this crammed up diagram here. And as you can see, I made the stack div a flex container with vertical orientation, flex direction column. Then I added overflow Y auto to the container, so the vertical scroll bar appears when content would otherwise extend past the boundaries. And finally, to get height values to propagate from the overall page to the body to stack, I added height properties to each. From stack downward, the flex container will propagate the height, but above that level it's got to be done by hand. An overflow hidden, by the way, might also work as an alternate to height 100%. But note also that height 98% is needed at HTML and body level to preclude vertical scroll bars from appearing due to the margin space glitch that we discussed earlier. I'll add an obligatory snipe there at CSS dumbness. By the way, if you dislike those height hacks, check out the box sizing style property. It's new. If this were written in 2014, we'd be using that instead as an alternate to height. So with these exercises done, you should be ready for a lab using flexboxes.